Hello Mech Warriors, and welcome back to Goofy Mechs, the series where we review some of the dumbest art in Battletech, and then have a look at the mech to see if you should judge a book by its cover, or if it's actually usable on the tabletop. Today we're talking about one of the worst mechs in the game, the Quickdraw. Let's get started with the silly original art that this unit has. I mean, I don't even know where to start. It's got this weird spherical head, its arms are all stubby, it's barely got elbows at all. The strange discs on its ankles, I guess these are armor plates to protect the ankle assembly, but these weird big discs are just so off-putting. I guess it does get mirrored in the design. We've got circles here, circles on the shoulders, and the head is just a big 3D circle, so this mech wants to be very rounded, which is good mech design. You do want your unit to be rounded, because that helps to deflect bullets, like this big circular waist assembly thing, which I'm assuming is where the mech does its torso twisting. It seems to be a common theme in Battletech that early mech designs just have weird looking feet. I mean, these are gigantic. You probably would need a big foot, but why did you make it just a giant rectangle? It looks so derpy. As usual with these 80s mech designers, we have just an absolutely ridiculous amount of lines all over everything and individual armor panels. This just looks so busy and awful. I always hate seeing it on a mech design. Why couldn't this just be a solid disc? Just make it a solid disc. Make this a solid disc. Why is there a bunch of lines all over it? There's no purpose for this. Why is there a circle drawn on the side of the legs? And also, because there's so many lines all over everything, I'm having a hard time telling what actually is the knee joint. Is it this right here? I guess this is it. It's the most obvious part, but it could just as easily be down here instead. Although that's very close to the ankle joint, so it's really hard to say. Circling back to this big circular head, this just looks absolutely hilarious. A lot of mechs try and design their cockpit to look like a face. They pretty much abandoned that idea with the Quickdraw. It's hard to tell where the cockpit is even supposed to be, and I also just don't understand why they went with this perspective. Are we trying to highlight the crotch region on this unit? Is there a reason why it looks like it is trying to take a glance at its missing package? Oh man, with this big armor plate on my chest, I haven't seen my pee-pee in years. These arms are just so incredibly stubby. They look ridiculous. You honestly might as well just have guns for arms if you're going to make your arms this small and non-functional. They can obviously barely bend at the elbow. The obvious reason for the design being like this is that it has hyper-extending actuators, meaning that it can turn its arms around behind it and fire behind itself. But there are other mechs in the game that have hyper-extending actuators that don't have little stumps for arms. Notably, the Marauder has full arms that it can flip around behind itself. And also, I don't know if it's the perspective or just bad drawing, but this arm looks completely ridiculous. It somehow looks even shorter than the other arm. I'm gonna put it down to bad artistry. Okay, then we have the 3050 update. Definitely an improvement in terms of looks, though I will say not necessarily by that much. The head has a bit more definition, and we can tell what things are a little bit more. Some kind of armor crest, or maybe antennas are jammed into here, this ridge part, and I'm assuming that the cockpit is in here, where there's what looks like glass. It's kind of hard to tell, but I think that's a reflective effect on the glass there. And we can see the arm is shorter on this side, but it looks like it's because the arm has been rotated backwards, and we can see that the elbow does in fact bend, but it can only do so to a 90-degree angle. So having the extra elbow joint in there almost doesn't even make a difference, because you could achieve the exact same effect as this just by having the shoulders rotate around. And it would actually make this little armor plate thing here more effective, because it would be guarding the sole joint that is the only weak spot on the arm. The feet still look really dumb, just gigantic, weird rectangle things. And why is this foot that is trailing behind lower than the foot that looks to be on the plane that it's standing on? That doesn't make any sense. I don't think that's actually possible. Again, some bad artistry there. But there's less lines all over everything, even though there are still a pretty egregious amount of lines on things. Also, why are the lines on this arm different from the ones on this arm. Both of these arms contain the exact same configuration of weapons, so there's no reason why there would be differing armor plates on each side. Also, I kind of love how the mech shows that the SRM pack does not rotate with the rest of the torso. That doesn't make any sense. You should absolutely be able to rotate the entire torso, including the SRM pack that's in the front, but for some reason, instead of twisting here, they decided to put the twisting mechanism above one of the main weapons of the unit. Now we get a bit of a different art style. I do like this look a little bit better. The weird circular plates on the ankles are still present and they still look kind of silly, but the arms are definitely improved. These look more like actual arms. They look more like they could actually function and have the elbows rotate properly and stuff, although for some reason now the legs look a little bit too short to me. And is it just me, or does everything look a little bit off kilter and like it's leaning to the left in this image? Alright, now we have what I would consider our first actual real glow up. This looks a lot better. I kind of like the silly little antennae. These do become a core part of the design going forward from this image. Still a pretty egregious amount of extra lines and patterns on here for no apparent reason, but the ankle disc things are a lot less ridiculously huge, and the feet have also been brought down to a more reasonable proportion that doesn't look gigantic and literally like clown shoes. Just one quick thing I want to go over is the angling of this central armor plate. It's angled so that anything that hits it is going to deflect upwards directly into the head. This seems like a really bad design to me. If you get hit with an autocannon round, it's going to deflect up and into the mech's face and potentially damage the cockpit. Now, the Mech Warrior Online sort of redesign that they did, in my opinion, looks really cool. We've still got the antennae, and I do like those. I think that they look pretty rad, and the arms look a lot more functional and a lot more like arms now. I don't necessarily love having big armor plates coming off of the forearms, but from a functional standpoint, but I do think it actually looks kind of cool. The legs look a lot better, although what's interesting is that now that the circular plate is gone, the ankles look to be a little bit too vulnerable to me. There's nothing here to protect this ankle assembly anymore except for this little frontal plate. And lore-wise, it is said that the Quickdraw does have a lot of problems getting its ankles kicked out. It's one of the glaring design flaws of the mech, which is probably why they have these big ridiculous disc things here. Finally, we have the torso cockpit variant of the Quickdraw, which ditches the weird spherical head in favor of mounting the cockpit in the body and replacing it with a giant laser, which is kind of hilarious. And also, I just love turrets on mechs, so I really like the way this looks. They've still kept most of the design elements reasonably similar. They've still got the big forearm protector thing, and they've still got the circular ankle armor. They've got a little bit less in the way of extra plates and lines all over everything, so this looks a little bit cleaner. I like this design quite a bit, and the asymmetry of having like one big pauldron on this side and not having it over here is an interesting design choice. I guess this left arm is a lot less important. It doesn't have a big main gun in it, so adding extra armor to here is less valuable than sticking it on here, although the mech definitely looks like it would be pretty unbalanced in terms of weight. Probably going to fall over due to the ridiculous amount of weight on the right side versus the left. Alrighty, let's talk some stats. Now, at the beginning of this video, I said the Quickdraw is really bad, and you can probably see why. It is ridiculously under-armored for a heavy mech. The problem with the Quickdraw is that it suffers from being too big for its britches. Once you go from a medium mech to a heavy, you double the weight cost of jump jets. So for a 585 movement mech, you actually end up giving up tonnage despite having a larger size. Now, comparing the Quickdraw to the Dervish, we see that the Dervish has much more long-range firepower with 2 LRM-10s instead of 1, and has about comparable close-range firepower, has the same speed and almost as much armor, and has a much better armor distribution with 15 on the torsos and legs and 20 on the center torso. Because the Quickdraw is for some reason obsessed with firing at things behind it, it places far too much of its armor on the rear. I could definitely see putting 5 points on each of the rear center torsos. That would make it better than the Dervish overall, in my opinion, but it doesn't actually do that, and being better than a dervish is not exactly an accomplishment. This is easily one of the other worst mechs in the game. But let's just ignore the dervish for now. We can see that even compared to a subpar mech, the Quickdraw is pretty bad. It doesn't have armor in the correct places for breakpoints. It has a single LRM-10 for long-range fire, which really isn't enough to threaten anything, and it does have a decent amount of close-range fire. I prefer the 4H over the 4G, and then I actually like the 5A the most out of all of the variants. It dumps the LRMs in favor of more medium lasers, and having the SRM-4 mounted in the front, it takes a lot of extra heat sinks so that it can do this and fire all of the forward-facing weapons all at once. For some reason, the designers of the Quickdraw are obsessed with having rear-firing weapons, which makes absolutely no sense. This mech has hyperextending actuators, meaning that it can fire all of the weapons mounted in its arms in the rear. So literally remove all of the rear-mounted weapons from every design and just take more armor or place them into the arms. Those are both going to be massive improvements to the design overall. The only thing that the Quickdraw has going for it is that it is relatively cheap, around 1200 battle value for all of these original variants, but being armored like a small medium mech means that you're not getting that much value for that cheap cost. It's going to get shot a couple of times and explode because it tends to carry a lot of ammo. It's got ammo in both the left and right torso for the 4H and 4G, and has some ammo in the right torso on the 5A. The 5A makes a decent, cheap striker at 1196 battle value, but there are other mechs that you can buy that are much better at this job, like the Jenner 7F, that are cheaper and honestly about as well armored. The Jenner 7F doesn't have quite as much armor as the Quickdraw, but it's not that far behind, and it is significantly cheaper and has about the same overall firepower, and most importantly, is much faster. Now let's take a look at some of the updated versions from later eras, and a lot of these are majorly improved. Both the 5K2 and the Quickdraw C, which is a C3 unit, up the armor a little bit by taking ferrofibrous, which allows it to get to much better breakpoints overall. We've got 17 armor on the front torsos, we got 18 on the CT, 16 on the legs, and it brings just a bunch of medium lasers for the 5K2. It still has a rear-mounted SRM-4, which is just such a baffling decision, and for some reason they decided to completely oversync this mech. It will literally never overheat. It can have 2 engine crits and still fire all of its weapons without overheating while jumping. So it runs ridiculously cool and has okay armor, about as much as some of the less armored Shadowhawks, which again, that's not very impressive, but it's at least better. And the C as a cheap C3 cavalry unit could be kind of useful, I guess. It's still a little bit under armored in my opinion. Now getting into the later eras here, early Republic and the Blakest kerfuffle, we have the 9M, which I like decently okay. It has a lot more armor. It does have its durability sacrificed by the XL engine, but it's got case 2 to protect the ammo from exploding, which is nice, and it has a targeting computer tied into a tag and 2 large lasers, which is pretty decent, accurate mid-range fire, and ups the LRM-10 from the older designs into an LRM-15. So this is kind of like a Thunderbolt that has a lot more speed and sacrifices the close-range punch of the lasers and SRMs for an extra large laser, and ties them into a targeting computer. So 1700 battle value is pretty expensive for a cavalry mech like this, but we've got good armor breakpoints, 25 on the CT, 20 on the side torsos, 24 on the legs. So this is decent. You could probably do better for 1700 battle value in 3086, but it's not the worst mech in the world. And the 5MR is just a really weird compromise of a couple of the different designs. We've got ER medium lasers in the arms. Again, we're back to the rear-mounted medium lasers, which is just super wasteful because it has the heat capacity to fire all of its weapons together, but can't make use of it because the medium lasers are in the rear. It does have a targeting computer, so those secondary targeting penalties that you're going to have for firing in front of and behind you at the same time are reduced, but like an Artemis LRM-10 and 2 ER medium lasers is very pillow-fisted for a mech of nearly 1500 battle value, even with a decent movement profile, and it's under-armored again. We're down under 150 armor, which is pretty pathetic for something of this battle value cost in this era. Overall, not a fan of the 5MR. I think out of all of the designs, the 5K2 might be the best. It's an okay compromise of speed, durability, and close range punch, but you can probably find a Wolverine or Shadowhawk in this era that will do the job better. The Quickdraw 8K is a really weird design. It up armors itself pretty significantly, so now it's at about the level of a Shadowhawk for armor. 15 on the arms, 16 on the torsos, 20 on the legs, and 22 on the center torso. Pretty decent. 4 ER medium lasers is an okay close range punch. And the MRM-30 is just a strange inclusion. I don't like MRMs very much, but they are pretty cheap on battle value, and they can hit really hard. The 5K2, probably better than this mech. It is a lot more expensive, although it is better armored. For nearly 1600 battle value, I'm gonna have to take a pass on this thing. And then after everything else, we get the really weird experimental tech. They decided to completely remove the head and torso mount the cockpit and stick a compact gyro into this thing, which takes up more tonnage but less space. But we have very good armor. 192 points of armor is pretty solid. And we have a head-mounted PPC, which means that it's very unlikely to get crit out, which is pretty nice. We've got a few close-range weapons to back it up, a pair of medium lasers and a Streak SRM4, and ECM Guardian and triple strength Myhammer. Now, the TSM on this is virtually useless because it's going to be very difficult to regulate your heat, especially because you have only 12 single heat sinks. So they decided to put Endosteel, compact gyro, a torso-mounted cockpit, triple strength Myhammer, and an ECM Guardian in this mech, but cheaped out on the heat sinks. Why would you do this? You spent nearly 10 million C-bills on this thing. There's absolutely no reason why you would ever cheap out on the heat sinks. This is ridiculous. Anyways, we do have pretty okay armor, which is nice, I guess, but why is there so much on the rear torsos? 10 armor on each of the rear torsos is entirely too much to be putting on a mech of this size, and they remove the jump jets, which is probably a good move. It really hampers the mech's overall tonnage availability. Then there is the very strange Quickdraw 8X. It has a lifting hoist mounted to the rear and a turret in its head, allowing it to fire the PPC in any direction, which is kind of fun and cool, but it can't fire the PPC while having its stealth armor active, because that will cause the mech to immediately overheat to a ridiculous degree. Now, according to Sarna, the purpose of this unit is to carry handheld weapons, which is why in the art you see it carrying a couple of different guns. Now, handheld weapon rules are absolutely and completely broken and should never ever be allowed on the table, because it literally just adds extra weapons to a mech that they should not be able to carry. But this thing can essentially carry like an LRM-20 or some of the bigger autocannons, which is pretty impressive. But again, it's completely undersynced, so I would probably never bring this to any kind of competitive game. I might bring it as like a funsy one-off if we're allowing handheld weapons, because that's literally what the mech is designed to do. But otherwise, this design is completely ludicrous. Let me know what you think of the Quickdraw in the comments, and while you're there, leave a like and please subscribe to the channel. It really helps out a lot. There's a link to my Ko-fi in the description if you'd like to support me directly. And as always, thank you very much for watching, Mech Warriors, and have a great day.